I think we can all agree with the following statement. Nobody's perfect. Now, as much as we like to think of ourselves in a positive light, there is no denying that we possess qualities that need improvement, be it anger, jealousy, greed, or lust. There is always something we think of as a flaw, or perhaps we think of it as a character defect, some part of us that we wish we could fix. Now, being self-aware is a good way to keep our less than admirable traits from taking over. Well, the same can be said for the characters you play when you are acting. We'll investigate finding the flaws on this episode of Casting Actors Cast.
It's time for another episode of Casting Actors Cast, insights for actors from a casting director. Here he is, your host, Jeffrey Dreisbach.
Well, hello, and welcome to today's episode of Casting Actors Cast. I'm Jeffrey Dreisbach. I'm a casting partner at McCorkle Casting Group in New York. How are you? Hope you're having a good day. Today we're going to talk about discovering interesting choices you can make when you are acting by revealing flaws in the character you are playing. But first, this is that moment of the podcast where I get to say, wow, thank you so much for tuning into the episode. Really looking forward to sharing this with you today. Listen, if you haven't checked out the website, I encourage you to do so. CastingActorsCast, all one word, .com. There you're going to find some interesting stuff. There are some freebies if you fill out that form that says dive into the talent pool. You simply give me your name and your email address. I don't do anything with that information, by the way. I might occasionally send out an announcement about an episode or some milestone that the podcast has reached. I'm happy to say that we're over 100,000 downloads of the podcast. It's very gratifying, and I can't thank you enough. But anyway, going to the website, when you fill out that form, if you haven't done so, then it opens up some freebies for you. One is a book that I wrote on doing voiceover work called Conversation Pieces Out of the Studio, the voiceover workshop for professional actors. It's a 100-page downloadable PDF. And I think you're going to find that really valuable, really, really useful. It's kind of a training manual with all kinds of exercises and things that you can do by yourself to help get you more comfortable and confident with the world of doing voiceover work. So I am just giving it away. I wrote it a handful of years ago, and guess what? It still holds up. I promise you. It isn't like a dated piece of information. It's really quite useful, and I've heard from many people who really have enjoyed the publication. So you're welcome to have that. Oh, also, there is a video called Casting Secrets, What They Don't Tell You. Yeah, but guess what? I'm going to tell you in this 20-minute video. You won't find that information on any other of my podcasts or my podios, podcast videos, but it's an exclusive. It's just a 20-minute watch, but I think you're going to find it really, really helpful. It's sort of a private conversation that I have. So you can check that out. And finally, if you haven't done so already, please give me a like. Please share the podcast. But most importantly, I could use your help. I would love to get a positive review on iTunes. I've gotten many, but you have to sort of keep up with that. And if you are getting something out of these podcasts, won't you just take a moment and give me a review, give me a like, give me a thumbs up. It's not that I'm desperate, but you know what? It really does keep me motivated to providing the information I provide. So thank you so much for letting me get all that out of the way. Finally, I just wanted to say hello to my good friends at Actors Connection, actorsconnection.com/New York. All right, let's jump into the subject today. Listen, every character that you play as an actor has what I call, and I think what acting teachers call, a fatal flaw. In other words, it's the question, what is the character's fatal flaw? And that really is defined as something that is detrimental or challenging for the character. It could be something mental, physical, emotional. It really doesn't make a difference. It's just a choice or a decision that you would make. So whether you are getting prepared for an audition or you're in rehearsal or maybe there's a class, knowing where your character's weakness lies is a really fantastic way to add depth and nuance to your work. Now, it's true that many times actors do not spend enough time working on this important aspect of the work. And so we're going to take a look at that. And we're going to go into some depth here today. And so let's get started. Here are some reasons for finding the flaws of character defects for the character. First of all, it provides added obstacles for the character you are playing. When you have an additional flaw, an additional issue that is challenging for your character, it really does make the character look and feel much more interesting. Second, it removes the literal choices I see actors make all the time in their audition. It's one thing to just simply literally interpret the work. It's another thing to kind of deflect those literal choices so that actors can really create some additional obstacles in the work, and that's just simply more interesting. Going for the literal default in any scene is sort of what most actors do. I'm challenging you to think in terms of what is that flaw? What is that hurdle that I have to overcome? Additionally, the fatal flaw colors the inner life of the character you are playing, presenting multiple choices that you can use in any given scene or situation. Next, if that fatal flaw is something that you're keeping a secret, just know that secrecy is really interesting and fun to play. There's no more fun than that. If you have a secret you don't want to tell anybody, and that's at the forefront of the choices and decisions you're making in your character. It also keeps the actor in the present tense. This is a very valuable tip. It's not that the actor is being anything other than reflective or passive. It really doesn't help the actor because they're in this past tense thought process. I don't know if that really makes a lot of sense. But when you have a fatal flaw, it really, here's that term that you've heard many times, it really keeps you in the moment because you're filtering things through your flaw, and yet you still have the scene obstacle. You still have the connection that you're making with the other in the scene. But now the flaw is part and parcel of the way in which you respond to the environment. So here's how the fatal flaw can work for your character. Well, I kind of alluded to this already, but unspoken issues become really interesting to play. If something is bothering you, that really is, and we don't even have to know what that is. It can really lead to an interesting way that you're playing the character. It also creates some spontaneity, and spontaneous behavior is really what I look for in any given audition, whether it be theater, film, or television. It's something spontaneous happening in the scene is just really captivating to see. It's captivating to experience from the actor. Also, if you view the flaw that you have as a weakness, that weakness can add depth and nuance to the work. That is the core function of understanding what your fatal flaw, your character defect is. So moving on from there, I think that it's important to understand that overcoming adversity in the form of your flaw, your character's flaw, is very heroic. There's something noble about working to overcome that obstacle that is in your character. let's move on from there. I think that when we kind of can, as an audience, we as an audience can kind of see you having this issue, it really does increase our identification and increases our empathy for your character. It's almost as if we recognize in ourselves something that we are experiencing in the way that you're playing it. Okay, now let's move on from there. The best methods for use. If you're choosing to do an audition, if you're choosing to work on a scene, if you're in a class, then here are some methods by which you can take this idea of using the fatal flaw and incorporate it into your work. First of all, make the fatal flaw part of the subtext. Now, you know that the subtext is what is not spoken. It's what your inner monologue is telling you, what your inner voice is saying while you are acting. If you make the fatal flaw part of that subtext, you've now given yourself additional depth and additional substance to the way you're playing the part. Also, understand how the flaw affects our behavior. I've said this 100,000 times. Acting is behaving. When we know we have an obstacle, or we don't know, but there is an obstacle, that fatal flaw really can change the way we behave. And that, my friends, that becomes so interesting to experience. Now, being flawed is not always a negative, so please be careful not to perceive it in a bad sense. Because why? Because even though it might be considered a flaw and therefore it might feel negative, it can lead to better choices. That if you have a situation in which you have a secret, the choices that you're making in order to go through that scene can be really amazing, in that your relationship with the other character can have a really interesting dynamic to it. And so it can really lead to not only the actor making better choices, but the character making decisions and choices based on the obstacle. Now, decide if you know your flaw is or is unknown to you. Do you know what that flaw is, or are you unaware of that fatal flaw? You may choose to make this flaw something that you're not even aware of, and yet it is still there. And when it is still there, it still has all of that same effects we were just discussing. Now, if you know that fatal flaw is there, then that's an additional interesting color as well, because it's in your consciousness. You know that you have to keep that flaw at bay. You know you have to keep that flaw a secret. And again, that allows you to have additional dynamics in the character you're playing. It also helps you understand how powerful or not your flaw is in the scene. Sometimes the flaw is not something that you wear on your sleeve, that you just make so obvious. Sometimes it is something that you are suppressing. Sometimes it is something that you don't give a lot of credence to in that particular scene, but it is still part of how you're playing the character. The point that I'm trying to make here, and I'm not sure that this is kind of making the most sense. You know, it's one of those things where I know what I mean in my head, and just trying to explain it is sometimes perhaps not as clear. I'm not trying to apologize. I'm just trying to say you might want to listen to this a couple of times, and just so that you can really key in to the point that I'm making. When you filter the flaw into your acting, it really becomes an excellent tool for making really cool, interesting, and unique discoveries, because your unique choices are really valuable in any scene. It makes that scene yours. There's a sense of ownership that you have when that flaw is part of the objective that you're getting to display in your work. So I'd like to wrap this up. Having a character flaw, in my opinion, should be thought of as simply another ingredient that you're putting into the creative recipe when you are growing and developing a character. So identifying what that flaw is, does that flaw make sense for your character? We don't even have to know what the flaw is. It colors the action in the scene. It colors the choices in the character. And that, like I said earlier, that creates depth. And it's the layers that make excellent acting. It's the layers that you try to suppress but can't that creates a really interesting dynamic in any given scene. So simply don't hesitate. Really think of the flaws your character might possess and tell yourself, you know what? I'm going to find the flaws so that I have something to overcome. Right? Wow, I know that's a lot. Sometimes I'm saying these things, and like I said, I'm not sure it's making a lot of sense, but I think it kind of does make sense. Please let me know. My email address, castingactorscast@gmail.com. If you have any questions, perhaps you want to continue this dialogue, trying to figure out what that fatal flaw is for your character. That could be an interesting podcast video as well. So please send me an email. You can also find me through the website by filling out that form that says dive into the talent pool. I hope you have a great day. Hey, listen, I'm really excited and really looking forward to next week because we're going to be talking about what happens at an agent interview. That'll be coming up in our next episode, so please stay tuned with that. And with that, I will say thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Jeffrey Dreisbach. You've been watching Casting Actors Cast.
Please don't forget to review, like, and share Casting Actors Cast wherever you get your podcast videos. Thanks. I'm Megan Grace Martinez.